Hi, and welcome to our team-based planning training. If you're watching this presentation, you are likely with your site team and are ready to reflect and plan with your data. So let's get started.
If you are using this tool for the first time, continue on with the recording. If this is not your first time using this tool, feel free to use this guide to skip ahead to the data planning process.
First and foremost, this is to be used as a team-based approach to data reflection and planning. You and your team should work through this as a way of reviewing sets of data that you have collected for your program. Your team can use this process to check progress toward existing goals or to create new goals. Please see our Preparing for Planning resources prior to starting this session, which will help you organize your team data and provide you with information to get started. Here's what you'll need to participate fully in the process. Before you get started, be sure that your computers are functioning and that your speakers are working. Your speakers should be loud enough for all team members to hear these recordings. Make sure each participant has ample writing space and comfortable seating, as well as markers, pens, or other means for recording thoughts and ideas so you can all fully engage. Before getting started, determine a place where you will record group ideas. You can write on a flip chart paper, a notebook, a computer, a whiteboard, or any other resource your team uses while meeting. We recommend recording information somewhere that you can find it in the future. If you're participating virtually, make sure you have a chat function and a shared online document that all team members can access, or other mechanisms for documenting your conversation and your plans. And last, but certainly not least, make sure that all the data you would like to review is present and available for all participants to easily view and discuss. Before we get started, let's go over the agenda. First, we'll start with an introduction. Then there will be space for your team to engage in a community builder or an icebreaker. Community builders help set the tone for the meeting. They help people get comfortable and communicate. They are important even for teams that know each other well. The community builder will help break the ice as you dive into your data discussion. After an introduction and a community builder in part 1, your team will review and reflect on the data that you brought today. This process breaks data reflection down into 3 important steps. Step 1 is to identify the highs and lows in your data. During Step 2, your team will take the time to add context by discussing what you're seeing, why it's important, and adding any relevant information that might help you with your reflection and planning. Finally, Step 3 will be to determine, based on your reflections on the data, the areas that you would like to improve. Your team will repeat these 3 steps for every data set that you brought to look at today. Once you've reflected on and discussed your data and identified areas that you would like to improve on, you will move into the second part of our agenda. During part 2 of the agenda, you will start by having a conversation with your team about what is currently on your plate. What initiatives are you running? What are the goals of your organization, your program, your funders, and the larger community? What else do you need to be aware of while considering the improvements you'd like to make? Next, you will develop the outline of a plan. We use the analogy of a restaurant menu to help your team think about your priorities, your time, and your resources so that you can develop improvement goals that are achievable and resonate with your site. From there, your team will discuss and create your improvement plans and finish by determining next steps, the resources you will need, and how you will track progress. Working through this process, your team will have meaningful discussions about the data you brought with you today and improvement priorities that are based on those discussions. You will be able to identify relevant and actionable steps to implement those improvements. Finally, your team will record your improvement plans and learn about the resources available for maintaining and tracking progress. Before we dive into the data, let's take some time to build community. On the screen, you see a few options for community builders, including a slide with some fun pictures to help you get started. However, feel free to use whichever community builder sounds most fun to your team today. You can pause now and resume once the community builder is complete. You can pause now and resume once the community builder is complete. Welcome back, everyone. We hope that you had fun with that activity. Now we're going to dig into our data reflection and planning. Here, you can see the process that we discussed when we went over the agenda. This is the process your team will be moving through today. There are a variety of different points from which your team may be starting. You may be looking at data for the first time or rechecking datasets after implementing improvement plans made during a previous planning experience. You could also be planning to use this process to incorporate new information into existing plans. This data reflection and planning process was designed to support your team wherever you're at in your improvement cycle. Use this resource in whatever way makes the most sense to your team, but remember these key principles. A team-based approach is the best approach. When you include many voices in data reflection and planning, your team has the most robust and informed conversation. Be sure that your team includes site leadership and frontline staff. Some programs also include program participants, parents, and other community members. Even if your team is experienced in talking about and planning with data, carefully follow the structure provided. Identify the highs and lows, add context through rich discussions, and identify improvement areas for each data set. This structure will help your team make sure your data reflection and planning is robust. Consider multiple perspectives and don't draw conclusions too quickly. Finally, be sure to record your highlights of your discussion and any goals created through the process, and follow it up with action. Let's start with the basics. Why is it important to collect, reflect on, and review data as a team? While data collection is certainly important for reporting purposes, it's particularly useful when used by the people who have the most power to make change. Collecting and reviewing your data as a team allows you to identify strengths and weaknesses in your programming and to make informed decisions about where to spend time, money, and other resources. Putting data in the hands of those it impacts the most, such as youth workers, helps shift our understanding of using data just as a tool understanding what's happening to a resource for supporting continuous improvement in our work with young people. To get the clearest picture of your program, it is helpful to collect data from a variety of sources in several different ways. We will spend the next section talking about how you can achieve this. Separating data into 4 distinct categories helps us determine whether or not our site is collecting diverse information. The 4 suggested data categories are quality practices, attendance and participation data, youth outcomes data, and program experiences. The first data category that we'll talk about is quality practices data. Quality practices are observable aspects of program and staff interactions that are linked by research to positive outcomes for young people. Quality assessments are often observational, meaning that these practices rely on someone's observation and feedback of a program. Using a research-based assessment tool provides your team with information that is linked to much larger data sets regarding quality in youth development programming. Attendance and participation data can be as simple as tracking who is coming to your site and how often. Research shows that consistent and sustained program participation is one driver of positive results for young people. Attendance and participation data can also provide information on specific programs or initiative attendance, retention, dropout rates, etc., especially if you're able to disaggregate the findings, meaning separate them into smaller components or subsets for comparison. An example of this would be looking at breakdowns of the numbers based on age or grade level. Additionally, when viewed over time, attendance and participation data gives your team a quantitative or numerical picture of who your site or program is attracting, how often they're coming, and other trends. Program experience data provides information on how your participants, their caregivers, staff, and volunteers, and other community stakeholders experienced your site. Whereas program quality data are typically based on observation, program experience data is based on individuals' or groups' own reports and descriptions. Positive program experiences are linked by research to positive outcomes for young people. Program experience data is often collected using written surveys, reflection activities embedded in activities, and/or interviews or focus groups. Within any of these approaches, you can encourage creativity by including artistic expression such as photo voice, drawings, or open-ended written queries such as asking young people to write a poem or story. Collecting program experience data provides your team with an important perspective from your stakeholders about what happens within your program and allows you to be responsive to their interests and needs. Finally, we have youth outcomes data. As youth development professionals, our work is grounded in a desire to have meaningful impact in the lives of young people and in our communities, both now and in the future. Youth outcomes data gives your team insight into how young people in your program are learning and growing, as well as the skills and competencies they're building. Youth outcomes can be measured using pre- and post-tests, retrospective surveys completed by participants, staff, or others, such as teachers and parents, educational information like school attendance, grades, and test scores, literacy achievements, or other social-emotional skill measurement tools, to name a few. Your program likely has its own outcomes measures linked to program vision, mission, and goals. When you put these 4 categories together, you get a more complete picture of what's happening in your program than any one of them can deliver individually. Remember, programs that engage young people consistently and for sustained periods of time in high-quality activities where they have positive experiences are more likely to achieve desirable outcomes. Although it is possible to plan and make improvements with only pieces of this puzzle or some of the categories, the clearest and most robust plans come when reviewing your site from multiple angles and multiple sources. Take this time to have a discussion with your team by answering the following questions. What puzzle pieces does your team collect? What pieces are missing? How could you collect this data? Now, pause the video and use the data collection worksheet as you discuss these questions. Begin the recording again once your conversation is complete. Now that we're back, let's start the process. If your team is using this time to review just one dataset, you can skip this step. If your team has multiple sets of data to review, choose one to start with. If you're unsure where to start, here are some ideas for how to choose. Discussing data takes time, so you could start with the set your team thinks will require the most discussion. Or begin with the dataset that is most familiar, which may be easier to use as you become used to this reflection process. You may choose the data your team is the most excited about discussing. If all else fails, let the person on your team with the nearest birthday choose which set you'll review first. Now that you have chosen a dataset to start with, let's discuss it. Start by considering the following questions. What are the highs that stand out to you? What data points are you proud of? What are your lows, things that are concerning? Sometimes, when reviewing data, it isn't clear whether the findings are positive or negative. If you're not sure where to place a particular result, but believe it is important, you can record that information in the What Stands Out section on your worksheet and note them with a question mark. Now you can pause the video while your team discusses the questions on the screen. Be sure to record your highs, lows, and I don't knows on their designated space on the worksheet. Your team has just taken the time to have an objective conversation about your data. You have identified the strengths and weaknesses you see in your data set, and now it's time to add context to that discussion. In this step, your team will review what you recorded in Step 1 and use the guiding questions on the screen to record necessary information about the data. Feel free to skip any questions that do not resonate with your team or add any questions or discussion prompts that you feel are necessary. Be sure to record the highlights of your team's discussion on your worksheet, but there is no need to record every answer or detail. Now pause the video and resume when you get to Step 3. Finally, we get to the last step in our process. It is now time to look back at your team's discussion and decide the improvements you'd like to make. It can be helpful to think about what points were the most contentious, what feels like the most immediate need, and where your team's interests are. At this stage, avoid discussing how your team will improve. Instead, keep the conversation focused on what you would like to improve. Your team will get the chance to identify how you will make your improvements after you have reviewed all data sets. For example, suppose that a team noticed when reviewing data from a program experience survey that young people said they do not feel connected to staff. That team would like to improve the connections between staff and participants. This team writes, "Improve connections between staff and youth" on their worksheet. This is an example of what they would like to improve instead of how they would like to improve. An example of how they would like to improve would be increase use of community builders between staff and youth. The team will have time to develop a plan as to how they would like to improve staff connections later in the process. Pause the video and discuss what improvements your team would like to make. Congratulations! Your team has just finished reviewing their first data set. If your team is only reviewing one data set, you can move on to the next section. If your team has multiple data sets that you'll be looking at today, repeat steps 1 through 3 until all data has been reviewed objectively, discussed to add context, and improvement areas identified. Pause and resume once all data sets have been reviewed. Welcome back. Your team has just used their collective brain power to review the data that you brought with you today. Let's pause from thinking about data and prepare for our improvement planning discussion by determining what's on our plate. Discuss the following prompts with your team and record answers in a space where everybody can see. What is currently on your plate? What grants, programs, partnerships, and other things might be taking your team's time and resources? Pause the video and record all the items on your team's plate. Next, let's think about the fork by answering the following questions. What new things would your team like to take a stab at? Are there new partnership opportunities or new programs your team is interested in? Are there young people who aren't currently participating that your team would like to reach out to? Pause the video and record what new things your team would like to take a stab at. Lastly, let's consider the knife by answering the following questions. What is cutting away at your team's time and resources? Are there aspects of your programming that are non-negotiable, such as homework time or other academic support? Is your team spending a lot of their time managing behavior? Pause the video and record these important considerations for things that may be cutting for your team's time. Now that we've taken a breather and you've thought about what's currently on your plate, let's look back at the improvement areas you identified while reviewing the data. It will be helpful to take the last page of your worksheet for each data set and put them in a space where you can view them together. As you review the improvement areas your team identified, discuss the following questions. What feels most important considering the context you added earlier? What improvements does your team think will have the most impact? Knowing that your team has limited resources, what improvements could wait? Pause and discuss these questions with your team. After the discussion, record the top improvement areas that emerged from. We recommend that you choose a maximum of 3 to focus on for your improvement planning. Once you have identified your top improvement areas, you can resume the video and move to the next step. At this point, your team should have 3 improvement areas identified. Now it is time to discuss how you would like to improve them. We will start by brainstorming ideas. If you're working with a small team, brainstorm together ideas for how you can improve on each area. If you're working with a larger team, it is helpful to split into groups and give each smaller team an improvement area to focus on. Let's consider our example from earlier. We remember our example team stating that they would like to improve relationships between staff and young people in their program. During their brainstorming, they came up with all kinds of ideas for how they might improve relationships between staff and program participants. Some examples were doing at least one icebreaker every day, holding a staff versus youth basketball game, and creating a mural together that represents their program. Now that you've heard some examples from our imaginary team, pause this recording and brainstorm improvement ideas with your own team. Be sure to record all ideas so everyone can see them. It might be helpful to give each improvement area their own flip chart paper or whiteboard area to help keep ideas and plans organized. Pause the video and discuss until you have a range of ideas in each of your top improvement areas. At this point, your team should have identified your top improvement plans and have a general idea of actions your team could take to make these improvements. Some of these ideas may be simple and require little effort or energy. Some may be more complex and require significant resources and planning. Knowing that your team only has so much time and so many resources, it is important to prioritize. For this process, we will continue our menu analogy from earlier. We will go over prompts that will help you examine your improvement ideas in context. Consider a 3-course menu, one that has an appetizer, a main course, and a dessert. The appetizer refers to something easy that your team can accomplish with a relatively small amount of effort or resources. Consider the improvement ideas that your team discussed. Which idea seems like it would be easiest to accomplish? What can you knock out quickly with little effort? Discuss this and record the most appealing simple idea on the appetizer section of your menu worksheet. Pause the video and resume when you're ready to move on to the main course. Next, we have the main course. This will be the bulk of your team's improvement work. Consider the following questions. What will take some effort and resources but have a lasting and important impact on the young people we serve? How does our team want to focus the majority of our time and efforts? What idea are we really excited about? What feels challenging but achievable? Based on the answers to these questions, choose your main course, the improvement that will require the most investment but with the largest return. Pause the video and resume when you have determined and recorded your main course on your menu worksheet. Last but not least is dessert. Think about this last category as your pie-in-the-sky aspiration. This should be something that your team is excited about and that you would love to do, but which takes a considerable amount of effort, resources, and coordination. Consider the following questions. If we had unlimited resources, which of these things would we do? Which of these ideas is a step to a larger, long-term goal we'd like to work toward? What would we just really love to do? Pause the video and record the improvement idea that best represents your dessert on your menu worksheet. Congratulations! Your team is almost finished with your data reflection and improvement planning process. Now that you've had a chance to review and discuss your data, identify areas for improvement, and brainstormed ways to make those improvements happen, it's time to create an actual plan. Team goals are achieved when there are concrete plans with timelines and key steps determined, along with responsibilities for tasks assigned. Team goals have a clear definition of what success looks like, and everyone on your team understands the goal and their role in it. To help us think about this, we will learn about creating SMART goals.
In this video, we will review a best practice way of thinking about goal setting. We're going to use the SMART goals framework to set up our team for success. When you set SMART goals for yourself, your team, and your program, you provide yourself with a target to aim for. The SMART goal framework can help you and your team set useful goals. SMART is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, actionable, relevant, and time-bound. A SMART goal incorporates all of these criteria to help focus your team's efforts and increase the chance of achieving your goal. Let's dig into each word of the SMART acronym with some examples. First, we have the letter S, which stands for specific. When a goal is specific, it will be defined, clear, and unambiguous. For example, we want to increase youth's sense of belonging. Specifically, we want to create more opportunities for young people to form bonds with other youth and staff in the program. To make your team's goals specific, consider the following questions. What do I want to accomplish? Why do I want to achieve this goal? The next letter in our acronym is M, measurable. How will you know whether your team has been successful? The goal you set must have a clear definition of what success looks like and how to measure it. To make a goal measurable, ask, how many, how much? How do I know if I have reached my goal? What can I use to indicate progress? So, we know we want to increase youth's sense of belonging and opportunities for them to get to know peers and staff. To achieve this, we want 100% of staff to participate in the Building Community Workshop designed to teach staff how to intentionally provide structured opportunities for youth to get to know each other. The percentage of staff who participate in the workshop is measurable. Now that we have established how our goal will be measured, we move to A, actionable. To ensure your goal is actionable, consider this question. What actions will need to take place to achieve this goal? The action here is to provide the Building Community Workshop and make sure all staff attend. You might need to provide multiple opportunities to attend the workshop to meet the 100% participation goal. As a result of attending the workshop, staff will apply what they have learned by incorporating community builders into their program activities each day. Now that we know what steps or actions must take place, it's time to move to the R in SMART, relevant. This may seem like common sense at first, but it is important to take the time to consider whether your team's goal is relevant to your broader work. When a goal is relevant, it makes sense to your team and your stakeholders, including youth. It does not compete with your program's other initiatives. It fits into your program's strategic plan or larger organizational goal. For example, let's say your organization has committed to improving the quality of your program. Increasing youth's sense of belonging supports the overall goal of improving quality. And finally, we have the T in SMART, which stands for time-bound. Making a goal time-bound gives your team a deadline and allows them to track progress. If your team is not time-constrained, there will be no sense of urgency or motivation to achieve the goal. Ask your team, does this goal have a deadline? By when do we want to achieve this goal? In this case, let's say you want to see an increase in sense of belonging by the end of the school year. This provides a concrete date for when you will check to see if the goal has been achieved. So, let's put this SMART goal together. By the end of the school year, we will increase youth's sense of belonging by making sure 100% of staff participate in the Building Community Workshop and begin intentionally using community builder activities with youth during daily program activities. We've just shown you how to create a SMART goal. Taking the time to make sure your goals follow the SMART framework will give your team a clear sense of direction, push you further, and help you organize to reach your goals. Don't forget, your program's goal setting is about what you and your team want to accomplish for your youth and community. Keeping your goals SMART will help you get there.
It is now time to record the details. For each improvement area on your menu, create a plan. You could think of it as a recipe using the SMART Goals framework. Consider the following questions. What tasks need to be completed? Who is responsible for them? What resources are needed? How and when will we check progress? How will we know if we've succeeded? Using an improvement plan template provided by your local after-school network or organization, or one that you've created, complete an improvement plan for each goal. Pause the video and resume once you have completed your improvement plans. Congratulations! You've reached the end of this data reflection and planning session. Before closing your meeting, take the time to identify any next steps, follow-up items, and tasks that need to be completed to finish your planning process. You may have specific instructions from a local after-school network, a national organization, or parent organization for improvement plan deadlines, how to enter them, and who to send them to. If that is the case, be sure to check on what comes next after you finish this process and review any available resources or guidelines for post-improvement planning follow-up. Additional information about the foundations of this process, as well as other program improvement supports, can be found at www.igniteafterschool.org/improveyourprogram/M3. Finally, please take the time to reflect as a team and give each participant a chance to reflect as well. You can use the reflection provided on the screen or one of your own. Pause and reflect. Thank you for participating.